New tonight, the Georgia Republican Party has a new member. This comes after a state representative announced today she is switching sides. Representative Misha Maynor represents a solidly Democratic district on Atlanta's west side. She says her decision came after her fellow Democrats disagreed with her opinion on school choice. She's now reportedly the first black woman who will serve as a Republican in the Georgia General Assembly.
Wow. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and to the We Are Ready audience out there. This is Reginal Drummer, the peopleologist, coming to you live this evening for everybody that's joining us either on Facebook, Instagram, or any of those other platforms. Make sure you come over here to Square Mile Media Atlanta. Hit that like, subscribe, and share button. Also be ready to comment. Interesting conversation that we're having tonight. And when we think about the young lady we just saw that take, that clip, Miss Misha Maynor, Georgia State Representative, Southwest Atlanta, converted over to the Republican Party, District 56. Her party is 90% black, 90% black. I want you to just sit in that for a minute. But tonight we're talking about these parties, all this stuff. You know, we got a lot of jargon that we got to get familiar with. Also want to encourage everybody to check out my new book, Find Them, Focus, Follow Up, and Finish. Go over to the Find Them, Focus, Follow Up, and Finish page over there. That's a powerful tool. That's a powerful tool that will help you with your business, finding customers, finding business, everything. Oh, man, it was like 20 years in the making. It's awesome. But when we look at politics, here in the United States, we have two major parties. And we pretty much say a lot of times they're almost the same. They're on the same coin, just a same coin, two different parties. But I wanted to look at what those parties, you know, what they stand for. Because, you know, when you say Democrat, what is a Democrat? And what is a Republican? A Democrat, that's they use the donkey. They use the donkey for their symbol. They are an advocate or supporter of democracy, social equality, equal opportunity, voting rights, minority rights. Republicans, they use the elephant, or sometimes they call the GOP, the Grand Old Party. They believe in lower taxes, small government, free market capitalism, free trade, deregulation of corporations, and restriction on labor unions. But there's some other parties. You got the Reform Party. That's a powerful party. You have the Socialist Party. You have the Libertarian Party. You have the Natural Law Party. And you got the Green Party. Matter of fact, we got a brother, Dr. Cornel West, going to be running over on the Green Party, I believe, for president. And then we got so many different terms. We're just going to throw them all out here tonight. You could be a moderate. You could be a independent. There's such things as, what's that? Oh, liberal, a liberal or a Democrat. I mean, what's the difference? Well, this is what Webster says. Liberalism, political or moral philosophy based on the rights of the individual, consent of the governed, the right to private property. This is what the liberalism or the liberal ideology is. Conservatism, individual freedom, limited government, rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free market, and human dignity. And then when we think about what they would say, left wing and right wing, left wing and right wing, same bird, two different wings. Left wing, extremists or ultra left. This is used for positions that are more radical, more strongly rejecting capitalism mainstream representation of democracy, advocating for a socialist society based on economic democracy. Right wing refers to a spectrum of politics thought that tend to be radically conservative, ultra natural, or nationalistic. And then we have independence. We have we also have communists and socialism. All these things. When we were growing up, I remember in civics we talked about different forms of government, a republic, a democracy, a dictatorship, a monarchy, fascism, all these things. They seem so far away because during that time period, we were either a Democrat or Republican. As Black people, and this is interesting. And let me throw this out there. I forgot about the Tea Party. Oh yeah, we forgot about Sarah Palin and those. You know, but we've seen so much controversy in the parties, and what what do they mean? What do they stand for? When we look at, I have to look at Black people in our history during Reconstruction. I think the first Blacks were all Republicans. During Reconstruction, that period of 1865 to 1871 was all about Republicans. And you know, I got to bring my brother in, the Honorable Mr. Tyrone Brooks, who served in a district here in Georgia, and he definitely brings a lot of expertise, especially when we talk about parties, bipartisanship, what we're looking for. Why do people, move around? We have in the Senate, I think Joe Manchin, I believe, might always vote contrary to what the Democrat Party said, and I think even I forgot the guy that's up in Massachusetts that ran for president, but it was so many people that vote differently than the party. But we're gonna bring Mr. Tyrone Brooks. How you doing, sir? How you doing tonight? It's your audio. Trying to hear you. You might be muted. You got to unmute yourself. Your mic. I can't hear you right now.
I don't.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Okay.
How you doing, Mr. Tyrone Brooks, sir?
I'm doing well, doing well. I'm in Atlanta today, and tonight and tomorrow I'll be around Atlanta again, and next day I'll be traveling. But I have a friend calling me from South Africa soon to talk about the African National Congress and what's going on with ANC. So I'll be with you for a little while.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, we talked a couple times, and you shared with me when we talk about the parties, especially here in America, we look at the two major parties, Democrat Party, the Republican Party, and sometimes they force us all to go in that route. But we're finding that there are other parties, even people cross-section parties. There's a little bit here. We're a little moderate, we're a little conservative. We go through all these terms, we go through all these labels, and we find out that they might not mean that much to especially the young people coming up, because people are looking at parties, they're asking the big question, what are they doing for me? But maybe you can share some insight, even a little bit about your history, introduce yourself and reintroduce yourself to the audience. You've been with us before, but I know you're always out there doing some powerful things in the community.
Well, my name is Tyrone Brooks, and I am a unapologetic, unrepentant disciple of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I was raised in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference primarily by Reverend Hosea Williams, who was my supervisor and my second father for many years. And I'm still, a member of SCLC, and I'll always be a part of SCLC because you would not know my name. The people out there who are listening would not know my name were it not for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. You wouldn't know me. So SCLC really is the foundation for my activism, and also really responsible for me being in the House Representatives for 35 years. So I give all the credit to SCLC, and I always say that to President Steele and Chairman Bernard Lafayette and all of the members around the country. And so listen, y'all pat me on the back and say this about me, but were not for SCLC, you would not know my name. I never would have gotten elected, and the people never would have elected me and let me serve them for 35 years. I was elected 18 times by the people of Georgia, never lost an election, even though they tried to defeat me one time when I was chairing Cynthia McKinney's campaign. And they tried to defeat me a few years ago because of the Moors Ford Bridge movement that we are conducting, where 5 African Americans were lynched in 1946 because they dared to vote. We talked about voting. Well, 5 Black folks went to the polls to vote. 2 couples and an unborn infant, Monroe, Georgia, July 25th, 1946. They were all lynched. Down in Butler, Georgia, Taylor County, Maceo Snipes was lynched the day after he voted, a Black man. And all of the lynchers were white. They were Democrats. All of the lynchers were Democrat. The lynch mobs were Democrat, Dixiecrats. So, I like to say to people who are listening today, 2023, and, they're talking about today. Well, I talk about yesterday, today, and tomorrow and beyond, because I know that these cycles, they continue to come and go. They continue to come and go. People want to get Democratic one day. They want to be Republican the next day. And it depends on what's flowing in their communities, what kind of benefits are coming, what kind of jobs are coming, what kind of education programs are coming. What about the criminal justice system? And so the party in power is always the party that's going to be targeted. I hope one day before I die, and I hope I live to be 100 years and 5 months and 12 days as my mother, I'll see my people become more bipartisan. I want to see my people, Black people in America, become more bipartisan. You could be a Democrat, you could be a Republican, but let's play the game as it's supposed to be played and not just be lumped into one party and let people tell us where we're supposed to be. Let's be where we want to be, where we ought to be, and how we can gain from the system as every other group. It's time for us to leave the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to money and finance, when it comes to education, when it comes to the criminal justice system, when it comes to housing. You look at the metrics and you'll see that we as African Americans are at the bottom. Everybody else is above us. Latinos, Asians, you name the group, white people, they're above us in every category. We're still the last ones hired and the first ones fired. We still pack the jails and prisons more than any other population in America. More Black people are locked up in Georgia and across this country than any other segment of the population. So something has got to change. The economic wealth gap has got to change. The racial discrimination that we see every day, the police brutality that we see every day, it's got to change. And so I say to my people all the time, no matter where I am, my speech is the same. You be wherever you want to be on the political party level. But think at the end of the day, you got to make sure that the people you put in power are going to deliver for you and not take you for granted. Dr. Joseph Lowry, who passed away 2 years ago at the age of 98, I would introduce him a lot. And he would always get up to the mic and he would say, well, listen, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm a Methodist. And then he'd turn to the crowd and said, Tyrone is a Baptist. He said, Tyrone is a Baptist. So he was saying, he was planting a seed in the minds of people that we as a people need to be thinking about who can deliver for us in our communities rather than be wedded to a political party that's going to take us for granted. Joe Lowry would say, one party takes us for granted, the other party just won't take us. And what he was really trying to do in his own funny way was plant the seed to make us wake up and realize that it's not about the party, it's about the person that's serving you. And the parties are the Democratic Party, Republican Party, you can say Libertarian, Independent, all of them. They all about controlling the money. They're all about putting their people in place. They don't care about us. And so when you look at the parties, you say, there's no difference in the parties. That's why I think a large segment of the people in this country are leaning more toward independence and trying to find a way to carve out a niche to be more competitive in their own way. I told Jesse Jackson in 1984, after we'd ran him for president, and I was the chair of the Georgia campaign, and we were meeting in D.C. at the headquarters, and we were talking about, well, where do we go from here? And I said, Jesse, we did wonderful. We came in second place in Georgia. We beat out all of the others except Walter Mondale in Georgia. And we went all the way to the convention in San Francisco, and your speech on the convention floor in San Francisco was the highlight. And I said, you
Oh yeah.
challenged the Democratic Party to eliminate runoffs and second primaries, which were carved out not only in Georgia but across the South to keep us from winning Democratic primaries. To keep us, we had to run twice. Still have to do it in most states. Run twice to win once. So, Jesse, you have highlighted a very important inequity in the body politic on the Democrat side. Let's use the power that we've generated from the '84 campaign. Let's use that to create a third party force. I wasn't talking about just going out and creating a party and calling it a party. I said, let's create a force that can bargain between the Democrats, bargain between the Republicans, and whomever can deliver for us. That's what we ought to urge, and I underline the urge because we can't tell anybody how to vote. Urge our
Right.
people to follow this particular person that's going to advocate for us on that platform. But Jesse didn't want to buy into that. He said, nah, yeah, well, he wanted to run again in '88. He said, well, we're going to run again. I said, you're going to run again in '88. I don't have time to do this again because I've expended so much energy and time and resources in the '84 campaign. I mean, I was smeared by the Democratic Party for chairing Jesse Jackson's campaign. I said, listen, all of the Democratic leadership, they fought us all the way, but we won because we came in and took you all the way to San Francisco. So I couldn't get him to buy into that in 1984. He ran in '88 and did well, but he never became president. But he laid the foundation for Barack Obama to
Mhm.
win, of course, in 2008. Shirley Chisholm had planted the seed in 1972
Yeah.
with her independent voice in New York. But Jesse came around in '84. He laid the foundation. He never gets credit for that. I've never heard Barack Obama say, thank you, Jesse Jackson, for allowing me to build on the planks and the party platform that you initiated in '84, all the changes you brought about. Thank you, Reverend Jackson, for laying that foundation and creating those steps for me to climb up to become president. Never heard him say that. So he tries to
Mm.
ignore the role that Jesse Jackson played and the foundation that Jesse built and what Shirley Chisholm did. Going all the way back to
Yeah.
Carlotta Hall, who ran for president many years before them. I just hope that we as a people one day will wake up and realize it's not the party, it's the person that serves you, no matter where they are. I'm proud to say that my daddy was a Republican because he couldn't be a Democrat. And when he tried to vote in the Democratic Party the first time in 1946, he and my mother and others went to vote in Warren County, Georgia. The Ku Klux Klan had
Mhm.
surrounded the courthouse, and the sheriff knew that
Wow.
these black folks were not going to be denied the right to vote because my father and others went home and got their weapons. They came back, and that was a confrontation. It was like a standoff, and the sheriff begged
Mhm.
them to please calm down. He said the colored folks can go in this door, the white folks can go in that door, and eventually everybody voted. Now, I had just barely been
Mhm.
born, so I did not know this story until the mid '80s. I started putting this story together based on my son's research. He was only 8 years old, and he kept asking the question, why wasn't granddaddy with my daddy when he was growing up in Warrington? He didn't understand why my daddy wasn't around. Well, my daddy had to escape a mob of Ku Klux Klansmen and get to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania by Charleston, South Carolina. A white man drove him from Warrington to South Carolina to Charleston. And my relatives who had come out of Hancock County, Georgia, Sparta, they came down and picked my dad up and took him back to Philadelphia. They saved my dad's life because he was going to be lynched. He was going to be hanging on a tree with the rope around his neck. But a white man drove my daddy from Warrington to Charleston, and my relatives came and picked him up. 2 weeks later, my dad was working for Penn Central Railroad because he was a member of A. Philip Randolph Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union. So my daddy became a Republican because he had the confrontation with white folks who tried to lynch him. My mother basically remained a Democrat. She would vote for some Republicans. I know she voted for Senator Mac Madigan in 1980 when he ran against Herman Talmadge and beat him because my family, my grandmother and others always taught us you can't grow up and vote for a Talmadge, not in Georgia. You can't vote for a Talmadge.
Okay.
They're racist, they're segregationists, they're Klan based, they're from Telfair County, Georgia. Cannot vote for them. And Governor Eugene Talmadge was one of the instigators in the Moores Ford Bridge lynchings in Monroe, Georgia. That's the reason I'm wearing this cap tonight. It says Moores
Okay.
Ford Bridge lynching. That's why I have it on, and I'll be doing the same when I do this other interview from South Africa soon. So I just say to my people, wherever I go, and this was my message in my 35 years in the legislature, I always was a bipartisan kind of a guy. I would go around and get Republican lawmakers to sign my bills with Democrats. I remember when I first got elected in 1980, my first session was 81, and the Black Caucus chair was Al Scott from Savannah, Representative Al Scott. He walked up to me and he said, "Brother, we've been waiting on you to come in here and get sworn in because we need your name on a lawsuit that we're going to file against the Democratic Party." And I said, "Well, there's Jose Williams over there. There's Julian Bond in the Senate. What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, we already have them, but we need you." And I said, "What is it about?" He said, "Well, we're going to sue the Democratic Party because they won't carve out one majority Black congressional district out of 10. We're only asking for one. We're going through reapportionment, 1981. So we have to sue every Democrat, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, secretary of state. And we won our case by going to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately approved our district. And that's why we carved out the 5th congressional district that ultimately John Lewis got after Andrew Young left to become ambassador at the UN. And John served that district for many years. And now we have Nikema Williams in the seat. But with that 5th congressional district should not be taken for granted. We had to sue the Democrats. We won the case at the U.S. Supreme Court. And we are proud of that. So now we're going through the same thing in Alabama. African American lawmakers are fighting in Alabama. They're fighting in Louisiana to get one more congressional district based on the Supreme Court's decision that the lines drawn by the Republicans diluted Black voting strength and really created an opportunity for white people to gain more seats, and we lose ground. So reapportionment is always a battle. It's about who's going to have the power, who's going to be in charge, who's going to be writing the budgets, who's going to be drawing the lines for the next reapportionment session, et cetera. So I have the experience of living through a lot, and God has blessed me. Therefore, the books and the movies and all of that will teach the next generation, and some in this generation will see this. The books and the movies and documentaries will show them where we've been through my lifetime, but we already know the history. You mentioned it earlier. You know, after the Civil War and Reconstruction, Black folks were basically Republicans. We could not be Democrats because the Ku Klux Klan controlled the Democratic Party. Well, most Republicans who became Republicans in the mid-'60s, after we began to win the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and President Lyndon B. Johnson was signing those bills, and he told Dr. King and Abernathy and others, "Hey, when I sign these bills now, we're delivering the South to the Republican Party for another 100 years. And I once asked Dr. Abernathy, I said, "Dr. Abernathy, you were in the meeting. What did he mean?" He meant that, well, white folks are going to be so angry that I'm signing the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and the Open Housing Act. They're going to be so angry, they're going to leave the Democratic Party and start voting Republican. I said, "Dr. Abernathy, when you were in that meeting with Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy and other leaders, Congressman Walter Fauntroy, I said, what did you all say to President Johnson after he made that statement?" Dr. Abernathy said, "Tyrone, I told him, well, Mr. President, if you don't have a pen and you're ready to sign, I have one in my pocket right now." And he handed him his pen. The president said, Dr. Abernathy said, no, he had a whole box of pens on his desk. And he signed the bills and he handed them pens. Well, my point is this. After President Johnson said, signing these bills are going to cause Democrats to leave the party across the South and give the Republican an upper hand, Dr. Abernathy said, there's a price to be paid. He said, my people have been lynched. My people have been burned on the stake. Churches have been bombed. Homes have been burned down. We have been ran off plantations because we wanted to vote. And Black men have been castrated. Black women have been lynched. Babies have been cut out of their wombs in Monroe, Georgia, and Valdosta, Georgia. Dorothy Malcolm, Monroe, Georgia. Mary Turner, Valdosta, Georgia, right outside of Valdosta. You know, so I said, Dr. Abernathy, you've got to share this history. He said, Tyrone, he said, I'm going to share the history. But those of you young bucks in SCLC, as you continue to matriculate and grow and move on, you've got to share the history because you're going to continue to make history as you do the work in the movement, in the civil rights movement, in the SCLC and beyond. So I never tell people how to vote. You vote your conscience. And I think people ought to be in whatever party they want to be in, wherever they best can serve. But we should not allow these parties to continue to play us. We should be open-minded. We should be creative, and we should think about who is running, who is going to serve us, who's going to deliver for us. And one of the prime examples that I bring up all the time is Senator Magmatically after we beat Herman Talmadge. He voted basically 100% with us all the way through his 6 years in the United States Senate, including on South Africa, divestment from South Africa, when the Democratic congressman from the 5th District in Georgia, White Fowler, took a walk and would not vote to end apartheid in South Africa by banning the Cougaron and South Africa Airways from landing in this country. Mac Madden
I
voted with
got a
us all the way.
question. It got a question, and thanks for that question coming out of the audience. What do you think about political people that were elected? Just say, for instance, the young lady, Miss Maynard, she was elected as a Democrat, but she crossed over midstream to the Republican Party. Is that fair? How does that work? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've seen switches before. I've seen it go both ways. Democrats switch over, Republicans switch over. I've seen it all across the country. Every person who's in public office has to make their own conscientious decision. But ultimately, the voters will decide who's going to represent them. The voters will decide that. And I think a lot of times, like Senator Tim Scott in South Carolina, when he first ran, people said a black man can't win the United States Senate in South Carolina. I said, well, if he get enough votes, he can win. And some black folks said, well, black folks not going to vote for him. I said, well, some blacks will vote for him. Some whites will vote for him. Well, he won. Now he's running for president. We'll see what happens. But I always tell people it's up to the constituents in that state, in that district, whether you're in the federal system or the state system or local, it's up to the constituents to decide. So I never go out criticizing people for making a decision as to which party they want to be in. I think we ought to be in all parties. I think we need to be flexing our muscles in every party like every other group in this country does, and not be taken for granted by one and ignored by the other. We'll see how that goes. I don't know the lady who represents the district in Atlanta. I don't know. I don't think I ever met the lady, but she's made a decision, and then she'll run again, and the voters in that district will have to decide whether they want her to perform and stay in that seat or whether they want someone else. But I think we need to stop picking on each other because we make a decision, conscientious decision, that we want some things done and a party that we're in won't deliver for us. And then we move over to the other party and see what that party will do. And if that party won't deliver for us, then, hey, we got to figure out what to do next. And that happens all across America. It's not just in Atlanta. It's not just, Washington or Chicago, New York, California. It is across America. You got to make a decision. And when you make that decision, you got to face the people. And if the people like what you've done, hey, they'll keep you in office. If they don't, they'll take you out of office. The seats belong to the people. The seats don't belong to us. I said that for my 35 years in the legislature. I said, I'm going to get Democratic leaders like Representative Larry Walker from Perry and Representative Calvin Smythe from Columbus. And I'm going to get Representative Johnny Isaacson from Sandy Springs and Dorothy Felton from Sandy Springs to sign my bills. And Speaker Tom Murphy, the red dog Democrat, yellow dog Democrat, he didn't like that. He said to me one day, young man, I know you're new, but you don't need to get Republicans on your bills. I said, Mr. Speaker, I'm a bipartisan thinking person. I'm an independent kind of a thinking person. And I believe my constituents want me to deliver for them. He said, well, we're the Democratic majority. You don't need Republicans. I said, well, when you need Republicans, you go ask for them. I said, when you need a constitutional amendment and you can't get Democrats to go with you, you cut deals with the Republicans. I see you doing that, Mr. Speaker. He looked at me. He said, you really are watching me, aren't you? I said, yeah, I'm watching you. And I said, you're going to watch me because whenever I introduce my legislation, you're going to always see Democrats and Republicans on my bills. And I did that for 35 years. The people of my district, Atlanta, supported me. They understood the goal was to move the needle, to get us to places that we hadn't been before, changing the flag, getting more African-American judges, getting African-American law enforcement officers into the pension system that were denied because of their race. I mean, so many things we did. I mean, fighting to bring justice to Morse Ford in Monroe, Georgia. I mean, that's been bipartisan. And so I just want people to understand, when you're playing the game of politics, it's about how much can you get from the system for your constituents, whether you get it on the Republican side or the Democratic side. What can you get? I told Jose Williams, Reverend Jose Williams,
you know what?
Dr. Ralph Abernathy. Yeah.
I got another question. Maybe you can share, because when a person, they, just say you elect somebody and they vote on their belief or how they feel about something versus how their constituents feel about something. Uh, do you see that a lot? Did you see that a lot during your time there? Because sometimes people elect somebody and they'll come hug all the babies and say, well, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. But when it came down to their vote, they voted on what was their best interest versus what was the best interest of the people.
You got to stay grounded with the people that put you in office, no matter what position you're in, and your conscientious decision as a lawmaker, whether you're at the federal level, state, or municipal, or county level, it has to match with what your constituents want. If your constituents seeing you deliver for them, they basically will support you. If they seeing you just on TV and doing sound bites and in the headlines and just with a lot of rhetoric and no deliverance, they'll take you out. They'll get rid of you and they'll move on. I was about to say that I remember when my second father, Reverend Jose Williams, who raised me up in the movement, and Dr. Ralph Abernathy came to me in 1980, the year the Reverend Joe Boone, the legendary Reverend Joe Boone in Atlanta, Georgia, where Simpson Road is now Joe Boone Drive, came to me and said, we want to run you for the legislature. And I said, no, nobody will vote for me. I've been called a black racist by the Atlanta Journal and Constitution. I've been to jail so many times across this state. And across this country, nobody's going to vote for me. He said, Tyrone, the people like the work that you guys have been doing. Now, he's talking about boys and girls and men and women. He wasn't just said boys. He said, you guys have been doing the work. They appreciate that. And if you run, they'll elect you. I said, I don't believe that, Reverend Boone. I said, I don't believe that. Well, he sent his daughter down to the Capitol. Her name is Jolanda. And she brought $400 in cash money. She put it on the Secretary of State's desk and said, I'm here to qualify Representative Tyrone Brooks for the House of Representatives in 1980. I wasn't even there. They called me over. The Secretary of State, you need to sign this document because this young lady just brought the money here. Reverend Joe Boone sent it, and they want you to run. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it for Reverend Boone. But I didn't expect to win, but we won. We won. I was the most surprised person of all because I didn't think the people wanted somebody like me, a civil rights activist, following in the tradition of King and Abernathy and Jose Williams and others. They don't want nobody like me. But Jose was already in the legislature. That's what Reverend Boone was telling me. So Dr. Abernathy and Reverend Williams, Jose Williams, came to me in 1980, the same year that Jimmy Carter was running for re-election as president. And they told me at the historic Pascals, one by one. Jose one day, Abernathy the second day said, now listen, we're getting ready to do something in Detroit. We're going to Cobo Hall in Detroit, and we're going to endorse Ronald Reagan for president over Carter. And we want you to know it first, because when we do it, the news media is going to descend on you. They're going to be all over you trying to get a response. And we want to give you our rationale for doing it. And I said, Jose, Dr. Abernathy, now no matter what you all do in Detroit, I will never, ever, ever say anything negative or critical of you in the media or to the public. I said, if I have a disagreement with you guys, I will call you. We'll go behind closed doors and we'll talk about it. But I'm not the kind of person that's going to run to the media and bash you based on your political decision. They thought that this was an opportunity to have an entree into the White House because most black leaders were going back with Carter. And they were also angry that President Carter had fired Andrew Young as ambassador at the UN. And there's a long story behind all of those issues. So I said to them, I said, well, I'm running. You all are going to endorse the president, Reagan in Detroit. You do what you have to do. But I'm going to run my race, and we'll talk about that later. Well, they read and endorsed Reagan at Cobo Hall in Detroit. After Reagan gets in, one of the bills on his desk in the first couple of years as he's in office is the extension of the Voting Rights Act. And I said, Jose, it's time for you to go and tell him to sign the 25-year extension of the Voting Rights Act. And Jose said, Tyrone, I'm on my way. He said, I'm going to Washington, and Walter Fauntroy, Congressman Fauntroy, and I are going over to meet with the president. We're going to urge him to go ahead and sign the extension of the Voting Rights Act for 25 years. And Reagan did. Then the next year, 1983, here comes the Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday bill that Congressman John Conyers had carried for many, many years. Congressman Conyers, the great legendary John Conyers from Detroit, in heaven now. He introduced that bill right after the assassination of Dr. King. And finally, in 1982, he just let Katie Hall from Gary, Indiana, introduce it. And lo and behold, the bill had enough traction to pass. So it goes to President Reagan. I said, Jose, you got to go and get Reagan to sign that bill. And Jose went up to meet President Reagan twice. Reagan signed the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday bill. Mrs. Coretta Scott King and the King family and all the civil rights leaders were there when Reagan signed the bill. Now, I said to Jose, Jose, if you and Dr. Abernathy had not endorsed Reagan, do you think you would have had access to him to convince him to sign the Voting Rights Act extension for 25 years and then come back and sign the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday bill? And Jose looked at me and he said, I doubt it. He said, there was some people, Democrat and Republican, who were telling Reagan not to do it. He said, there was some people telling Reagan, if you sign the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday bill, you've already signed the extension of the Voting Rights Act. You are dead in the water. You'll never, ever get reelected again. Well, he got reelected over Walter Mondale in 1984. But Jose, pardon?
I actually voted for Reagan in 80. Because I was again voting your interest. I was in the military, and you know, they were telling us that if you want to make sure that you get a good pay, this and that, and we improve the Navy, this gonna be the guy, Ronald Reagan. But I had a question from the audience, and thank you there, Letitia. Are politicians above the law? And I just got to put this out. Case in point, what's the 45th president? Well, I ain't gonna call his name, but you know, he's up for all kind of stuff. They got him on so many indictments. I think he got over 300-400 indictments against him. And you know, people say, you know, they're gonna lock him up. They're gonna lock him up. But are some politicians above the law?
Nobody's above the law. No one. A gentleman saw me the other day. I was down in Monticello, Georgia, at a Juneteenth event, and the gentleman saw me. He knows me. He's from Macon. He saw me, and as I was walking through the crowd, I'd been invited by County Commissioner Sheila Jones, and I promised her I was coming because she brought a huge delegation over to Monroe, Georgia, to be with us on April 1st as we marched on the Mooresford Bridge to remember Dr. King and the Malcolms and Dorsey's who were lynched. This gentleman hollered out something like, well, they getting ready to put Trump in jail. And I said, baby, but if they put him in jail now, they may come after your president, Biden. So it works both ways. And I told this gentleman, I said, I wrote a letter to Speaker Newt Gingrich when the Republicans decided they were going to impeach Bill Clinton. I wrote a long letter to Speaker Gingrich, and I was in the House in Georgia, and he was Speaker of the U.S. House. I'd met him when he was professor at West Georgia College over in Carrollton, and I knew him. He knew me, and I could communicate with him. I wrote him a letter and pleaded with him not to impeach President Bill Clinton. I said, whatever the circumstances are, he is not being charged in a criminal court. He has not probably done anything that warrants impeachment. If he and his wife can settle whatever the issues may be regarding the young woman that's in the middle of all of this, and we know her name, I won't call her name, but I said, you know, this is not a criminal offense. This is not an impeachable offense. But the Republicans thought this would give them a big boost in the re-election campaign coming up. So they impeached Bill Clinton. The Senate refused to convict him. But the next election cycle, the Democrats took both houses of Congress, and Newt was no longer Speaker. And I said, sometimes these political attacks on the other person in the other party will backfire. I haven't been able to have a conversation with Newt in a long time, but I wish I could get to him and have a conversation with him just one-on-one about where we are in the body politic today, because it's tit for tat. You bring down my person, I'll bring down your person, I'll smear your person, you smear my person. And the people in this country are just sick of it. They say, well, you don't get anything done that way. Let's get back to the business when Lyndon Johnson was president and you had Hubert Humphrey from Minnesota and Everett Dirksen from Illinois, and they were passing these civil rights laws and open housing laws. And Democrats would go back and campaign for their seats and Republicans would go back. But when they got to Washington, they worked together to deliver for the people of this country. The Vietnam War defeated Lyndon Baines Johnson. He couldn't run again. I mean, the Vietnam brought him down. Everybody knows that. But I just think the people are smarter than we give them credit for. And I don't know what's going to happen in all of these indictments. Indictments are just accusations. They're not convictions. Indictments I mean, someone like me, I've been to jail 69 times all across this country.
Mm.
I think people need to understand sometimes, um, it's politics involved in a lot of this, just like it was politics involved in Bill Clinton.
Mhm.
I think that people are getting sick of these attacks, whether they're coming from one side or the other, and they're saying, we put y'all in office to get things done. What about housing? What about jobs? What about dealing with the climate? I mean, the planet is burning up. What about all of these high prices at the pump? People want a decent standard and a quality of living. They want to reduce the crime wave in this country at every level. And I think sometimes we miss the point of what the people want. What do the people want? The people want us to deliver, and if we don't deliver, that'll take everybody out of office, whether you're Democrat or Republican. Because I think
Mm.
we do a disservice to people, we do harm to people when we have power and we don't use it to their benefit. We have the power, but we just fight and fuss, and we do all kind of crazy stuff, just to make headlines, just to try to get the up on the other party. And Democrats do it, Republicans do it, and if libertarians and independents ever win significant numbers, I'm sure they'll do it too. Really, I mean, it's about who controls the power, and so
Mm.
when I do speeches to political science classes and I talk to people on the street, they ask me a question. I said, don't ask me a question if you don't want my answer, because the answer
Mm.
I give you might not be the answer you want to hear. But if you ask me a
Mm.
question, I'm going to give you my answer. If you don't want to hear it, don't ask me. I'm
Mm.
not to give you the answer that you want. I'm going to give you the answer that I feel I should give you if you ask me the question. And that's just the way I live my life. But I think
Right.
we need to put the heat on all parties. I want to see people rise up and be critical of all parties, so that our people can come out of the poverty and the hunger and the degradation, and so we can reduce homelessness in every level across this country, in the urban and rural sectors of America. Too many people are homeless today. More people are homeless today than in 1966 and 67, when Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy decided we were going to have a Poor People's Campaign march on Washington. The homeless numbers have gone up all across America, all across this country. More homeless people today. Women and children walking around trying to find food in garbage cans, and sleeping out behind churches and buildings, and sleeping in their cars, and going to homeless shelters trying to get a meal on a different day. So I just think that the real issues are getting lost. I want to deal with
Right.
poverty and hunger and homelessness and crime, and I mean all crime, not just talking about the crime on the street, crime that's making the news. There's so much crime that the media won't cover it because it's not sexy, it's not popular. A general manager of Channel 5 TV back in the 70s was named Paul Raymond. And Emmanuel Hall, who was a reporter working at Channel 5, took me to meet him one day. And I don't know why they wanted to meet me. I was at SCLC. I'm just a civil rights worker. But the chairman said he wanted to
Right.
meet me. And I go out to Broadcliff Road with Emmanuel, and I'm sitting there with this man who's running the TV station. He was a CBS affiliate then. It's a Fox affiliate now. And I just asked him the question. I said, thank you, Mr. Vice President, Chairman, for inviting me over. But I got to ask you the question. Why do y'all run these headlines every day? The leading headline is about crime and violence, shooting and cutting and killing. I said, why do you run those headlines all the time? Why don't you run some good news? And he looked me in the eye.
Right.
He said, son, you're naive. You're young. He said, I got to tell you why. He said, because in the media, in the business of media, particularly broadcast media, if it bleeds, it leads. He said, that's
Mm.
what people want. And if we don't put those crime stories on, those horrible things that are happening every day, if they're not the headline drawers, people will flip and go to another station to get that. He said they'll flip the channel, they'll move on. And he said this is competitive. And he said it's about ratings, it's about advertising dollars. And he said if we don't put that story on, our competitors will have it on, and the people will follow them,
Yeah.
and their ratings will go up,
But
and they can charge more for advertising revenue. And I looked at him and I said, this is awful. You're taking advantage of the people's airwaves. You're operating on the public airwaves, but you're using crime and violence and horrible things that are happening to people every day to boost your ratings. He said that's
Yeah.
national media, that's local media, and if you don't like it, Mr. Brooks, he said you need to organize some people that can go out there with you and help change this atmosphere, because this, he said, this is the real world we live in. So I know crime is
Right.
bad everywhere across this country and around the world. I know that. We can see that. But people use crime and violence as a means to make and score political points, not only in Georgia, but
Right.
across this country. And we see crime around the world every day, all across Africa. 55 countries on the continent of Africa, and half of them at war with each other right now. That's black on black crime on the
Okay.
continent of Africa, where I'm going to be talking soon. So, brother, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate you thinking enough of me to let me come on your show. And I want to be with you in the future. When the phone rings, you'll see me pick up the other phone and go into another conversation. I'm sitting here with the other phone by my side. It hadn't rung yet, but when it does, I have to leave
Well,
you.
I appreciate you just sharing. You know, you bring such a wealth of expertise and depth of knowledge. You know, we just wanted to share because, you know, people ask me all the time all these questions and different things. I said, well, politics is just a beast. You know, once we kind of understand it, we can kind of figure some things. I had one more question. We've been talking now. What role does money play in politics? Because people say, you know, I can vote, but when they get that money, when politicians get that money,
Now you just asked the most significant question of all, because money controls the body politic. Money controls the body politic. People who serve in public office, whether they are the president, vice president, secretary of state, members of the Senate, member of the House, whether you're the governor, whether you're the lawmaker at the state level, whether you're the mayor or commissioner or city council, school board, judge, whatever you are, when you run for public office, it's the money. The people who control the money have more power than the elected officials do. Let me repeat that. The people who control the money that put people in power have more power than the elected officials do. And so the people who run this country, this is deep into this is my political science stuff. When people who contribute the money to elected officials, they control that person in so many ways, because that person then says, well, I don't need that person to get reelected. If I don't do what they say do, I won't have the money to run the next term. If I don't do what they say do, they'll run someone against me. So you're talking to someone who never had a lot of money in politics. I didn't campaign for money. I campaigned on my civil rights record. People voted for me knowing that I didn't have a lot of money. And I only had opposition one time in my 35 years, and that was because I was chairing Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney's campaign through her 12 years in the United States Congress. And they were trying to, you know, give Cynthia opposition, give me opposition at the same time, thinking that they could keep me away from Cynthia. But no, we were together every day. We both won by landslides. They never tried that again. But I'm telling you, the people who control Wall Street, the big bankers, the big developers, and we know the multi-billionaires of the world, it's a lot of them, and not just Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Microsoft, Bill Gates. No, there's a whole lot of billionaires out there that don't make headlines. They don't want any public. They don't want any publicity. They don't want the media. They won't talk to the media. But they have money that they put behind Democrats, Republicans, and they dictate the course of the body politic. They really, when you talk about the big money people, the big lobbying firms, the law firms, they write the federal budget. They write the foreign policy laws. I mean, they have so much money they put behind reapportionment plans and drawing maps and getting lawyers to represent one side or the other. I'm telling you, it's the money in politics that really controls the flow of what we see every day. So if you really boil it down and you look at campaign disclosure reports and how people vote, you look at who is hired after election cycles and where they come from, what law firms they come from, what think tanks they come from, you can see how the money goes. And it's Democrat and Republican. I'm not saying it's either party, it's both parties. And the Supreme Court a few years ago said, hey, money is free speech. So you can put as much money as you have in a campaign, and it is constitutional. It is constitutional. And so, listen, money controls politics. And only
Wow.
by the grace of God, someone like me who had the civil rights name coming out of SCLC, that's what propelled me into the body politic and what kept me for 35 years. That doesn't happen every day. That doesn't happen every day. That's happened
Right.
to Walter Fontroy in D.C. He was Dr. King's man in Washington. So when he ran for
Mhm.
Congress, everybody said, that's Dr. King man in D.C. Running our SCLC bureau at 14th and U Street. Well, he won and served 20 years in Congress. Made the mistake of running for mayor of D.C. and losing his congressional seat. That was the biggest mistake Walter Fontroy ever made. But Jose Williams in Georgia, when he won in 1974, he won on the strength of his civil rights work. Didn't have a lot of money, but he won and stayed there. He served in the House of Representatives for 10 years. He served on the Atlanta City Council. He served in the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners, all from DeKalb County. Jose Williams,
Mhm.
Atlanta DeKalb, Atlanta DeKalb, Atlanta DeKalb. And I'm urging people out in DeKalb County to support SCLC of DeKalb and the Georgia Federation of Teachers to urge your Board of Commissioners in DeKalb County to build a statue of Jose Williams on the courthouse square. It has to be
Ooh,
private
yeah.
money. But I've been informed that there's a movement in DeKalb County next door to Atlanta to help create a movement so that the commissioners out there will vote, just like they did in Dallas County, Selma, Alabama, to put Jose Williams statue at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, just like the city
Right.
council did here in Atlanta to put Jose Williams statue at Mosley Park on the west side of Atlanta. So I hope that we'll see a Jose Williams statue, not only at the DeKalb County Courthouse, but up in Forsyth County, where he led us twice in 1987.
Oh, yeah,
And down
yeah,
in his
yeah.
hometown of Attapulcus, Georgia, Attapulcus, Decatur County, down there, Valdosta, and between Valdosta
Okay.
and Thomasville and Quitman. That's where Jose was born, in Attapulcus. I'd like to see a statue of Jose down there. But listen,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
it is money that controls the body politic. That's the bottom line.
And you know, I know we hate to hear it, but it is.
It is.
And if as a people we want to move something forward, if we instead of taking the money, making sure Nike and all these big people got the money to do the things they do, you got to put some money, especially local politicians. We can control some of the actions and efforts of local politicians because
Well, you sound
we
like
can get
Dr. Joe Lowry. You sound like Dr. Joe Lowry again, because Dr. Lowry, he kind of he learned. I don't know why, but I didn't know him well in the early days because I was too young to be with Dr. Lowry. He was the chair of the SCLC board, and I was just a rookie on the Jose Williams. But after he became president of SCLC in '77, and I was still running with Dr. Abernathy. I was still his special assistant because Dr. Abernathy was president emeritus after Dr. Lowry became president of SCLC. But Dr. Lowry, for some reason, he got closer to me at every opportunity he could. Reverend James Orange would always tell me, Dr. Lowry wants you to come and speak at SCLC conventions, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, he just started following me and Reverend Orange and others around the state, President Charles Steele, as I was president of the Georgia Association of Black Elected Officials. We call it GABIO. And he would always say things that, like a question you just raised, he would say things like, we need to teach our people more. They don't get that from every elected official. They don't get it. We got to teach them. We got to show them what really matters. So when you raise these questions, you just remind me of Dr. Lowry in so many ways, because he would get up in a pulpit and I would introduce him. He would stand up on the floor and he would say, well, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm a Methodist. And you look out in the audience and say, Tyrone, he really is not a Democrat, he's a Baptist. And then he would say something like, Tyrone is crazy, but good crazy. So he learned to appreciate me and respect me. He knew they called me Jose's boy.
okay.
And but he made a point of stuff that we were doing in the movement. And so, yeah, I appreciate you raising these issues and questions, because you sound just so much like Dr. Lowry would do when he was alive.
Well, I firmly believe you should buy, lease, rent, or own a politician. When you can do that, you can get a lot of things done. And the work that you've done, and like you say, when a politician does their job for the people, they don't have to worry about a job because the people gonna keep sending them there. Because enough people will override money. You can get if you get enough people, they'll override the money if you take into making sure those folks
and
get the
that's
things
what
they
happened.
need.
That's how I got elected. That's how I got elected in 1980 and served 35 years. And that's really how Jose won and how Walter Fauntroy won. And really, when Cynthia McKinney first ran in 1992 for Congress, she'd already served 4 years in the Georgia House. But when she ran in 1992 for Congress, her daddy, Billy, and her came to me and wanted me to run for the congressional seat. And I explained to them why I would not be a good choice. I said, listen, my background and my whole life has been civil rights. The district was from South DeKalb to Savannah then. And I said, look, I know people up and down that corridor, and I marched and been to jail in most of those counties over the years, working with SCLC. I said, they know me, but I'm not the one because I'm going to have to get a percentage of the white vote to win. The district was majority black, but barely. So I said, if we run Cynthia, we can make her name a household word. People will know Cynthia McKinney. McKinney will know her because her dad is already in the Georgia legislature. And so I told Billy, I said, let me take her on the road. Just get in the car with me. And whenever I'm taking off, she'd jump in the car and I would introduce her in places of worship, civil rights meetings, rallies, on picket lines, on marches. I would introduce her up and down that corridor. And so she runs and she wins. She wins. She wins the seat. And she served for 12 years in Congress. And then she wanted me to be her chair and director. And I said, Cynthia, I don't have time to be all of that. Now, I can be the chair, but I need a white woman on my left side. I need a black woman on my right side. So I got attorney Margie Pitts-Haynes, a white lawyer, to be co-chair. And then I got Mayor Emma Gresham, the mayor of Keysville, Georgia, that we reactivated, the time we reactivated in 1986. I said, I want her to be a vice chair. So I'll be right in the middle. And we ran it that way. It was three of us as co-chairs for 12 years. And Cynthia now is, of course, in Bangladesh, doing wonderful work in Bangladesh. She's in Bangladesh and doing wonderful work. She comes home to see her mother and her son and her grands. But Cynthia's just, she's special to me because she always stuck with me. She always was right there with me in the trenches. And her father supported me all the way ever since he met me. He didn't like me in the beginning because I was a Jose William boy. But later on, he just said to me, he said, Tyrone, I know my daughter, she's going to follow you no matter where you go. And I said, I'm going to follow her no matter where she go. I said, but I want you to understand, at the end of the day, it's about how we serve the people. What are we doing for the people? And if we're not doing what we are supposed to do for the people, we don't deserve these positions.
That's true. That's true. Well, as we get ready, you got to let the audience know if you got anything coming up, how to get in contact with you.
Thank you. Let me just say this. In a few days, I'll be working a little more diligently on the streets across the state and beyond, helping the Southern Christian Leadership Conference take people to Washington, D.C. for the 60th anniversary March on Washington, where Dr. King delivered his I Have a Dream. August 28th is the day that we were there in 1963. I was going on 17 years old. I was just a little kid in the back from the country with Carl Farris, who was an SCLC staffer who drove me up with him. So we're going back to Washington to remember the 1963 March on Washington for jobs and justice. But SCLC's convention is also going to be a monument on the Capitol from Lincoln to Washington. That between them all, we're going to march on that Saturday the 25th. But there's some people who still are going to show up on the 28th because the 28th is really the March day. But I'm going to be supporting SCLC, and I'll be going up a few times before then, talking along the route and urging people to come and be with us because it's special to me. I was there in 1963. Most people who were there in 1963 are dead. Most people who were there in 1963 are dead. They're in heaven. So I'm one of the persons alive that was there in 1963 that's still alive today. So I plan to be there. I plan to go there. And I plan to really rejoice in the fact that Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream continues to live. And many of us, I wish I could say all of us, but I can't. I say many of us. And the other thing, of course, is as we do that, we are planning and looking forward to 2024, April 6, 2024. We will commence with the annual march and rally on the Moores Ford Bridge in Monroe, Georgia, to remember Dr. King and his work to end lynchings in America, and highlighting the lynchings of the Malcolms and Doyces who were lynched because they dared to vote in 1946 in Monroe, and also highlighting the lynching of Lynn McKinley Jackson, a 21-year-old soldier who was lynched in 1981. 1981, he was lynched in Monroe, Georgia. But we don't ever leave out Maceo Snipes, who was lynched in Butler, Georgia, Taylor County, on July 1946, after he voted over in Butler, Georgia, Taylor County. So we highlight these lynchings in Georgia. And then, of course, we connect to what's going on in Selma, Montgomery, and we connect to the lynching museums in Montgomery and the legacy museums in Montgomery, headed by the great lawyer, who found the resources, Brian Stevenson, who found the resources and has done a wonderful job of highlighting our history as much as he can. So we are planning for April 6th, Monroe, Georgia, 10 a.m. at First African Baptist Church, after we complete the March on Washington, August 25th, 26th. And some of us will still be there on the 28th, the actual day of the march. But SCLC convention, of course, is on the 25th, 26th. So thank you very much. It's time for me to shift to another interview.
Thank you. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Always, yes. Stay safe.
People can follow us on Moores Forward Movement on Facebook.
Okay.
Moores Forward Movement on Facebook. If you look at the cap, you see Moores Forward, and all you see on Facebook is Moores Forward Movement. Moores Forward Movement on Facebook. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you, sir. God bless you as well. Thanks everybody that joined us tonight. In the audience, the We Ready audience. Thanks for everybody that's continuing to support us. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification button over there at Square Mile Media. Don't forget, follow us over on Find 'em Focus, Follow Up, Finish. The book is out there. Let me make sure I got it in there. Off the presses. And also do your homework. We firmly look at buying, leasing, or owning a politician. 2024 is coming up, and so many elections. If you've seen what has happened in the past, if you look at judges that have been appointed, different things dealing with abortion, dealing with affirmative action, dealing with reparations, everything you could possibly think of is going to be going down in 2024. Okay? And it's going to shape stuff for the next, because the presidential election and the governor's election, it's going to shape stuff for the next maybe 10, 12 years. Okay? So that's the importance of it. And we have to look at how we can get someone to represent us. So you have to come together with your family, your community, find out the needs of your family and community. Individual thoughts and ideas won't be the system. Okay? Just being an individual by yourself, being a loner, you're not going to get it. This system is so powerful, it takes groups of people to come together, and then sometimes you're going to have to take a little bit from here, take a little bit from there. Like Brother Brooks was saying, bipartisanship, you're going to have to eat something you don't want to eat just to get something done. You're going to have to eat something that you don't want to eat, or take on something that you don't want to take on just to get something done. And this is what has to happen. And that's what happens in this type society. So take care. Take a look at your surroundings, your community, and find out what are the needs of your community. You might want to run for public office. You might want to put somebody in public office. Maybe your money is tight, maybe you got that type of influence. Things can happen that can change this whole game. This is Reginal Drummer, the peopleologist, and we'll see you next week. And by all means, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Have a great day.